What happens when a man returns from a charity mission and instead of his wife at home, he is met with emptiness and an email about divorce? What he did next set off a chain of events that shook the whole system. Honestly, I thought I was a normal guy. Not a hero, not a saint, but not such an idiot to wake up one day in an empty house with no coffee maker, no cat, and my own name on the doorbell. All I had was a suitcase, dust in my nose, and a letter from my wife, an email, about the divorce. But let's start with how I got there. And yes, I'm not some businessman with a fake smile and a corporate photo. I'm an engineer, a real one. The kind of person who knows how to put together a plumbing system out of a piece of rusty pipe, a piece of wire, and God's will. So, here it is. I just got back from Kenya. I was there on a grant to restore water supply in villages where children walk 5 kilometers every day with plastic jerry cans. I went there out of the goodness of my heart, you know, to do something good in this rotten world. My wife was supportive at first. She said, "You're doing something important." She even poured coffee in a thermos before I left. Cinnamon, just the way I like it. 3 weeks, heat, dirt, children who are seeing clean tap water for the first time. I wasn't complaining. I was on the rebound until I opened my phone in the layover in Doha. New email, official notification. From who? Her lawyer, not from her goddamn lawyer. I remember sitting in the waiting room, people around me drinking coffee, munching croissants, some kid playing on a tablet, and I was holding a PDF file with a divorce petition that said, "Please don't call me." Like I'm some kind of fan, not the man she lived with for 7 years and shared one toothbrush with on a business trip to Colorado. I tried calling 10 times. No one picked up. No messengers, no emails, nothing. All right, I guess. Maybe she's got a bad case of the nerves. Maybe she needs to talk in person. I landed in LA, already sensing that something was rotting in my marriage, not in Denmark. First thing I did was check out her social media page. All the pictures of me had been deleted. It's gone. It's like I never existed. Her feed's full of wine glasses labeled "New Chapter," "New Bloody Chapter," without me. When I got home, the key didn't fit anymore. At first, I thought it was just the wrong key. Then I tried another one. Then I knocked. No response. Just silence and a cat's paw drawn in chalk on the asphalt by the door. Amazing, of course, that even the drawing was still there. Everything else was gone. I went to my neighbor, Mrs. Lambert, an old lady who walked her poodle in her bathrobe in the evenings and knew more than CNN. She squinted at me through the blinds and finally came out. "She moved out, honey. Yesterday. Some guys took everything out. They said the wife was selling it all off." And then she gave me a look full of sympathy and curiosity. Curiosity. "You're the husband, aren't you?" I nodded and walked across the yard. The garage was empty. The bike was gone. The tools I'd been collecting for 10 years were gone. Even the weather station I'd gotten for our anniversary was gone. I broke down the mailbox door and there was a letter from the bank. 3 letters to be exact. 1. Your joint account has been closed. 2. Change of insurance beneficiary. 3. Vehicle sale completed. So she moved everything out. And the stuff. And the money. And even my goddamn old Honda that I once proposed to her in the rain in Sonoma. I walked into the house, or rather, what was left of it. The shelves are empty. The walls bare. No pictures. No footprints. Just a box by the entrance labeled, "Yours." Opened the laptop. Checked the balance. Where it should have been $23,578, it was $3.27. That's it. All the transactions were transferred to her. In 3 different ways while I was crawling under solar panels in Africa. And that's when I didn't have a tantrum. I just sat on the front steps and laughed. Not out of joy, at the absurdity of it all. A man went to another continent to fix his children's pipes and came back to nothing. And here I sit in the midst of this theater of the absurd, and I think, where, in fact, was the moment when she decided to cross me off? The next morning, I went to the legal clinic at the local church. Free help. There's a line out front. Inside is a man in his 60s with glasses and a file that looks like his own life. Shabby but full. The situation is dire, he said, looking through my papers, but legally clean, I'm afraid. She'd withdrawn money from an account held in two people's names. The house was in her name. It was sold without a violation. But the power of attorney to sell your car? That's weird. Weird. I questioned you. It was registered to me. He shrugged. There's a signature on it, sort of yours. Notarized by a notary in Long Beach. 2 weeks ago. I was in Africa. He stopped talking. Said he'd check back. I came out of there with a dull ache in my temples. Everything I thought was mine was gone. Not stolen, just taken out through legal loopholes. And I was eliminated like a line in an Excel spreadsheet. I couldn't sleep that night. I was lying on a cot at my brother's house and staring at the ceiling. She and I had a dream. We wanted kids. We thought about a farm. We bought books on interior design. She told me how she wanted to put a chalkboard in the kitchen for notes, where another man might be drinking her coffee in the morning. And I lie there counting the stains on the ceiling and thinking, at what point does a man become a stranger? The day he stops saying good morning? Or the day they know they're going to leave but keep smiling? The next day I went to the bank branch. The manager, a polite woman in her 40s, listened to me, nodded, typed something. Unfortunately, all operations were carried out with authorization, she said. But here's the strange part. The changes are by power of attorney certified in another state. That's unusual, especially if you were, as you claim, in Africa. I'm not claiming, I'm showing you. Here are the tickets. Here's a certificate from the organization. Here's a picture with kids and pumps. She took the documents, went to her office, came back 10 minutes later. We'll send a request to security, but, if the signature is forged, it's a criminal case. I thanked her. I went outside. The world hadn't changed. Cars still drove by. Someone was talking on the phone. Someone was laughing. Only I was in some other dimension, between before and after. And it was then, on the corner in front of the drugstore, that I first felt not just pain, but anger. Not hysteria, but the same cold, hard anger that doesn't allow a person to curl up, but to get up. I didn't know what to do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let it go. That night I went back in time for the first time, just to see where the cliff started. We met at a sustainable building conference. I was giving a presentation. She was representing a design studio. She smiled as if she was seeing a human being, not an engineer. We walked around the exhibit, argued about materials, then ate shawarma on a park bench, and white garlic gravy dripped onto her lap. She laughed. I remembered that laugh. It was honest, loud, without fear of being silly. Somewhere between that gravy and that empty box by the door, something broke. Not in her, in us. I blamed myself for a long time. Maybe I didn't spend enough time. Maybe I wasn't listening carefully. Maybe I wanted to make too much of a difference in the world, and I didn't realize it was all falling apart at home. But you know what? She could have told me. One conversation, one letter, one evening to say, I'm tired. But she chose silence. And the lawyer, an email. She chose to tear it down. No explanation, no attempt. And I'm just a man who went to Kenya because he believed water was a right, not a privilege, and came back to realize that trust is a luxury that can't be formalized in two. But if anyone thinks I'm just going to disappear, they don't know engineers very well. We can rebuild, only without the people who betrayed us at the first opportunity. I closed the laptop, got up from the cot, and looked out the window. Dawn, a new day. The old plans were gone, but there was one thing I could never take away, the ability to recover. I didn't know where I would find a job, where I would live, or how I would get myself out of this funnel. But I knew I would start with the truth, with the first complaint, the first inquiry, the first step, because even the most complex systems can be rebuilt, if you know where to start. On the third day after returning, I realized that just sitting down and waiting it out wasn't going to work. This isn't just a divorce. This isn't just a betrayal. This is an operation. Cold, deliberate, and apparently started long before my ticket to Kenya. I went to the law clinic at the university. There, graduate students were admitted under the supervision of senior lawyers. Not a luxury, but at least some help. They put me in a room with a girl named Sarah. She looked about 25, but she had the eyes of an investigator. At first, she didn't say a word. Then she picked up a pen. So the power of attorney was executed without your presence? Yes, a notary in Berkeley. I was knee-deep in mud installing pumps for the school. And you didn't sign this document? Not even close. I found out about it after the house was sold. Sarah looked closely at the copies of the papers. The signature's weird, and the date doesn't match your entry stamp. That's a good thing. Do you have photos from there? Tickets? I have everything, even the geo-tagging on the cell phone photo. I wasn't going there for a vacation. I was working on a contract. She nodded and left. She came back with an elderly lawyer in a tweed jacket who looked more like a librarian than a fighter for justice. But when he started talking, I realized, this man has lived in legal hell for a long time and knows how to survive there. If the notary did certify the forgery, he said, we're not just dealing with a family dispute. This is a criminal story, and possibly grand fraud, given the amount of the sale. I sat, listening, nodding. Somewhere in the back of my head, a voice whispered, it's too complicated. You're going to lose anyway. But another voice was already gaining strength. If not you, then who? That same evening, I went to an online archive of real estate transactions. It took me 3 hours, but I found it. Our house had been sold to an agency with a resale 3 days later. The scheme is as old as the world. They bought below market, then sold it for more. And then it hit me. It's not an accident. This is a plan, a scenario that I wasn't in. The next morning, I decided to do something I had been avoiding, contact the new owner of my former home. I found his name in the real estate database, found his LinkedIn profile, wrote. An hour later, a reply. Hello, I didn't realize there was such a situation associated with the house. I'm willing to meet and discuss if necessary. And so we met. A man in his 40s, polite, glasses, accountant's demeanor. He showed me the paperwork, the receipt, the date, the salesman's signature. Everything was clean. I didn't come to him with a complaint. I came for confirmation of the fact that the deal went through. The house is gone. I wasn't in the equation. After that, I went to the bank's central branch, no longer to a manager, but straight to the financial security department. I was seated at a glass table with a man in a gray suit in front of me. Are you claiming that funds were transferred out of your account without your consent? I claim I was on another continent at the time, and before that, I did not sign any documents. He looked at the screen. He clicked something. The money was transferred in 3 installments to an account in your wife's name from a different device than usual, confirmed via text message. The one that came to her phone? He didn't answer. He just nodded. I walked out of there and realized the system was on pause. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't calling the police. They weren't grabbing their heads. They requested an audit. It was like a complaint to the utility. You filed it, but it's not certain that anyone even read it. That night, I was sitting on the roof of my brother's house. He's got an old deck chair up there, the smell of pine needles and a slight draft. And the thought, it's so easy to cut a person out of your life with the push of a button, an electronic signature. And while you're digging a trench for the plumbing, you're replaced. Silently, coldly, rational. My brother suggested we go public. He said simply, look, you didn't break the law, but what they did to you is suspicious at the very least. Write about it. Not whining, not complaining. Facts. People need to know. I resisted. I didn't want to get personal. But then I realized if I kept quiet, she'd win by keeping quiet. So I wrote a post. It was simply, my story. Divorce by email. While I was in Africa, I was erased. No tears. With dates, scans, photos. No accusations, just the facts. It got 100 reposts in an evening. The morning after, a lawyer who worked at the notary's office wrote to me, unofficially. There are too many coincidences. If the signature was notarized and you were out of the country, it's serious. I gathered the documents again and sent a request to the notary's archives. And while I waited for a response, I started gathering other details. Social media, screenshots, pictures of her in meetings with the agency while I was 1,000 miles away. My brother got involved. He found gas station security footage of her with a man. The date was the day before the sale. They were laughing. She was holding a folder. I had no proof of who he was, but I had motive and a chain of events that lined up like a perfectly planned purge. I didn't sleep that night. I read old correspondence, dates, hints. She'd started pulling away a month before the trip. Then I thought it was fatigue. Turned out to be preparation. And now she was living in a new house, with furniture I'd hand-built, with dishes we'd bought after the wedding, a stranger, and I slept on a cot. The reply from the notary's office came in the morning. An email, official, with an attachment. I opened it and my heart beat faster. In the file was the conclusion, the signature appearing in the power of attorney for the sale of property does not coincide with the sample from the state archives. And the notary who supposedly certified the transaction that day did not work at all, was on sick leave. Period. Not a suspicion. Fact. I sat there staring at the screen and felt everything inside become crystal clear. This isn't just a divorce. This is not just a cold betrayal. This is a fake criminal. I printed out everything I could, got on the bus, drove to the law center, and when Sarah sat down in front of me again with a tired face, I laid it all out on the table. She looked at me like a medic looking at an x-ray, calm but with a different kind of fire in her eyes. "We're not going to let it go," she said. I nodded. That day was the first time I felt that I wasn't alone, that the truth had a voice. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's alive. And you know what the strangest thing was? I didn't feel the pain anymore. All that was left was clarity. Everything that had been destroyed was rebuilt, only without illusions. Late one night, I went to our old house, just to look at it. It was the same from the outside. Same shutters, same bench. Only in place of the sign with our names on it was a new one. Alien. And the light in the window was yellow. Warm, but not mine. At the gate stood a neighbor, Mr. Harris, the old man who used to help me concrete the driveway. "Are you coming back?" he asked. "Not yet," I answered. "But the truth is coming back." He nodded silently. I looked at the house and realized, I don't want it back. I want justice. And if for that I have to go through 100 offices, write dozens of letters, and sit in lines, I will. Because sometimes a man loses everything not to get over it. It's to remember who he is. I turned around and walked away, slowly, without looking back. Because the next step won't be about the past. It would be about rebuilding the present. At home, lying on my brother's couch, I remembered her voice. Not the cold one from the letter, but alive. How she once called me from the kitchen, holding a pie in her hands, and said, "We'll build a good life, won't we?" And I answered then, "Of course, together." The word together stung now. It was like phantom pain after an amputation. You feel it, but it's gone. And yet I wasn't sorry, because the word together now meant only one thing, me and the truth. And that's enough to start over. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else, put on a shirt, turned on my laptop, and started writing my first official statement. Not for revenge, for the sake of rebuilding, step by step, word by word. I walked into the courthouse in my brother's suit, a little big, a little crumpled, but against everything I'd been through, it was the most reliable armor. My hands didn't shake. Not because it was easy, just because everything that could break inside had long since cracked and scarred. The courtroom greeted me with the indifference of bureaucratic architecture. Gray tiles, wooden benches, the smell of coffee from a machine and stationery. Opposite was her lawyer, slouchy, confident, with a briefcase more expensive than my former car. She wasn't there. I guess she thought everything would go according to plan. The judge was going through the paperwork. I filed in person, without a lawyer. I was scared, but no shame. I came for the truth, not for revenge, not for a show. The goddamn truth. "Are you saying that the power of attorney was signed without your participation?" the judge asked without looking up. "I do, and I provide evidence. Here are copies of my tickets, passport, certificates from Kenya, geolocation of photos, and the official response of the notary's chamber, the signature forged." The notary was absent. The judge put the papers aside, looked at me humanly for the first time. Were you summoned to the registration? Non badu. I found out about the sale after the fact. From a bank statement. He nodded. The ex-wife's lawyer tried to interject. Perhaps the power of attorney was executed in advance. Perhaps my client is mistaken. But the judge raised his hand. That's enough. If a document is forged and used in a transaction, it's beyond the scope of a civil dispute. This is a criminal investigation. I didn't even feel relief, just silence, deafening like a basement. But there was no fear in that silence. It was the beginning. After the meeting, I went out into the corridor. The walls, like the people, were cold. And there she was, standing at the window, phone in hand. No smile, no makeup. For the first time in a long time, real, but not mine. Did you really decide to bring all this out into the light? She asked quietly. Did you think I'd just disappear? She looked away. I didn't mean for it to be like this. How did you want it to be? An email? With zero in my account and a new man in our bedroom? She didn't answer. I'm not retaliating. I'm defending myself, I added. I don't want you back. I'm just tired of the truth being buried under layers of technicalities. She nodded, slowly, as if recognizing it wasn't something that could be broken anymore. I turned around and walked away. A court officer caught up with me on the way out. He handed me a copy of the ruling. The investigation had begun. All transactions were suspended. I signed the document and went outside. The sun was beating down on my face. It was sharp like a new beginning. At that moment, I realized I had gone through the vortex in which most things break, but I hadn't fallen. I gathered the debris and built a ladder out of it. 3 days later, I got a call from a radio station. One of the editors read my post, saw the case data, and offered an interview. I hesitated, but then I agreed. It wasn't a story about the personal. It was a story about a system that allows a person to be destroyed while he helps others. The interview aired this morning. No tears, no complaints, just the chronology, just the facts. When answering questions, I kept my cool. And for the first time I felt, I'm not making excuses. I'm telling. As a witness, as a person who has something to say. The next day, a stranger wrote to me. It turned out that he was a former employee of the agency through which the house was sold. He leaked internal correspondence. There were instructions to bypass the owner, no contact with the husband, all questions through her, dated, copies of the letters. I took it all to a lawyer. A week later, the ex-wife deleted all the accounts, disappeared off the grid. The lawyer changed. I guess someone realized the joke was over. I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't looking for destruction. I was looking for justice. But when the system won't listen, the only way out is to speak up. That's when I got a call from the DA's office. They wanted to take an official statement on the power of attorney forgery case. They set a date, invited me with the originals, and I realized I'm not the one going around the offices anymore. Now it's their turn. I came to the prosecutor's office wearing the same jacket I wore to court, the same stitching, the same elbows. But now, and with a folder with enough to not just prove a fact, but to start a wave. I was met by a female prosecutor in her 40s, strict, calm, with a keen eye. She went through the documents, asked questions, one by one, clearly, without emotion. I answered confidently. I had nothing to hide. Sahar, the signature on the power of attorney wasn't yours? No. Where were you on the day you signed it? Here's the certificate, the photo, the tickets. It all matches. Did your wife notify you? Ilian, not a word, not a letter. Just an email from her lawyer. She made a note in her notebook. We'll be running a background check. If it proves to be a forgery, we'll prosecute. And the agency, if they acted with knowledge but without confirmation, their actions will also be examined. I came out of there with a feeling that's hard to describe. It wasn't a victory. It was a shift. Like you were pushing a rock up a mountain and it finally started rolling down the other side. Down. But in the direction of justice. That's when I smiled for the first time. Not with joy. Calm. The trial wasn't over yet. The investigation was just beginning. But I could already feel that her scheme was cracking, and with each step, the crack grew wider. 2 weeks later, I returned to the district. I had to sign the documents at the district commission, and as luck would have it, I ran into her mother outside the building, the same one who had once called me a trustworthy guy, the one who smiled at family dinners but kept an icy, "You're not one of us" look in her eyes. "Are you happy with yourself?" she asked me without saying hello. I looked her straight in the eye. "Nobody. That's not why I'm here. You're destroying her." "Me?" I grinned. "She tore it all down on her own. I'm just digging up what's left." She was quiet, for the first time without arrogance. "You're not going to back out, are you, Nonbada? Not even if I have to go all the way. Because you know, when a man goes off to help children drink clean water, he shouldn't go back to the mud." I turned around and walked away. Not a word was spoken behind me. That night I lay down on my brother's old couch again, but for the first time, with a feeling not of emptiness, but of movement. Forward. Not toward revenge, but freedom. I was no longer someone to be crossed off. I was the one they were afraid to forget. In the morning, I got up before everyone else. I went outside, breathed in the cold air. There were no clouds in the sky. Everything was clear. Just like inside. I wasn't thinking about the house or the bill or the furniture anymore. I was thinking about how easily people lose their humanity and how hard it is to get it back. I wasn't betrayed out of fear, but out of calculation. And yet I didn't become the same. I didn't choose silence. I chose truth. And perhaps that was my loudest victory. I looked at the laptop screen. There was a new document, a new project, a new meaning, not revenge, not a fight, but an opportunity to begin. Where there was once a stop sign, I've put another one. Building. Because those who don't give up will always have a chance. And if you're reading this, know this. Sometimes the only thing you have is your voice. But if you choose to use it, it can change everything. A week later, I applied for a fellowship, for a program that was looking for people with experience in humanitarian projects. I didn't know if I'd be accepted, but I made the move. And guess what? A month later, I got a response. A short one, dry, but it was all about the word approved. I didn't yell. I didn't run across the room. I just sat there staring at the screen. Because in that moment, I realized I was needed again. Not as a husband, not as a victim, but as a man who survived and moved on. And the rest is in the archives, in the files, memories, but not me. My life is mine now, without powers of attorney, no forgeries, no lies, from scratch, but for real. And if anyone asks me what I've accomplished, my answer is simple. I got my name back, and that was enough to be me again. I promised myself one thing, never again to be silent when they tear down what you've built, because silence is a convenient screen for lies, and I've learned how to take it off. Sometimes you don't get a chance. Sometimes you become one. And if this is just the beginning, I'm not afraid. I've already been through the end.